And the following comments are strictly my opinion. Today's my first day of retirement, and I'd like to make some comments on the last 20 years here at the county. I first went to work for the county in the Board of Commissioners office, doing some of the stuff that Bobby does now. By the way, at that time there were 4 people in the office, so you know how much Bobby's taken on. I moved out to the road department in 1996, and I've worked there for the last 15 and a half years. I worked with 11 different commissioners during this time, from Jack and Doc and Gordon to Bob and Fred and Cam. Never, in the 20 years I've been here, has the board been so difficult to work with as they are now. The worst part started back in January, when Nikki was in the hospital and Andy was the new commissioner, giving Bob the opportunity to practically run the county on his own. This was when he took on his God complex and started issuing edicts. The first was that 2 commissioners must approve anything before it goes on the agenda. And then there were never 2 commissioners here, so items would get held up for weeks. Then there was no purchasing anything over $500 without approval from 2 commissioners. You ran into the same problem again. There were no commissioners available to grant their authorization. And this was when there had already been a policy in place for years granting spending authority to each department. At that time, the road department couldn't even pay the card lock invoices when all the purchases were from other departments, nothing to even do with the road department. We just pay the invoice and bill the other departments, and we had to get approvals to pay these bills. Then it continually got worse and worse. Even emails went unanswered for days, so a vehicle that was broken down stayed that way until approval from 2 practically non-existent commissioners could be obtained. Things continued to get worse with the tragedy of Andy's death, followed so closely by Nikki's. Cam was thrown into the mix with no clue whatsoever about how the county operated and was listening to whatever he was told by Bob, no matter how inaccurate. The county was being run by unsubstantiated gossip from a group of naysayers. In the road department instance, the 4 or 5 laid-off employees who made weekly and sometimes even daily visits to the commissioner's office were having their complaints heard, and none of the board even relayed the issues to the road department. Then came the ridiculous speech from Bob about no swearing allowed in any department, how he was going to talk to all departments right after speaking to the road. I've talked to employees from several different departments. No one else got that ridiculous speech. I guess when you've got a preacher complaining to you, you have to take heed. Of course, there have been many times since then that I've heard the same language from the commissioners themselves. Things got consistently worse in April and May. The 3rd edict came down that no one could drive their county vehicles home with them unless they worked for the sheriff's office. Even emergency responders at the road department were unable to drive their rigs home, so they were not able to respond to any call-outs without driving from either Coos Bay or Bandon to get their pickups with the necessary equipment. And then on the budget issue, a few years ago, when the entire county learned that forest payments were going away, the road department, which has its own fund, started a reserve. So when the time that revenue was reduced came, we'd have funds available for emergencies. We've also set funds aside for the replacement of the Gaylord Bridge, which has been accepted into the STIP and which will go out for bid in a few years. Our 10% portion of this bridge will be over $1 million, and if we don't have the match, the bridge won't be built. Then the big blind side at the budget hearing. In the most rehearsed, spontaneous decision I've ever heard, that the road department had surplus cash that didn't need to be saved, and to call back 5 employees who were laid off. The same 5 employees who had visited the board again and again, the same 5 employees who had made up stories about how bad things were at the road department. My personal estimate is that within 3 years, these same 5 employees, and probably more to pay for unemployment, will be laid off, this time permanently. Once the reserve is spent on day-to-day operations like personal services, it's gone. At least by purchasing new equipment, our equipment repair costs went down from $1.4 million to $635,000. With savings of over $800,000 per year, mostly in personal services, the equipment will pay for itself in a couple of years because it's an investment, not just a payout. This board is so intent on micromanaging their departments that there's really no need for department heads anymore. They are so involved in the day-to-day operation, they have to work 50 to 60 hours a week to keep up. Most of these complaints have been ongoing for months or even years, and if they would just discuss the issues with department heads, they could find it out with going through county council or dealing with the complainants themselves. Almost all of the department heads have been here many, many years longer than Cam or Fred or council, and a lot has happened in the last 5 years or 15 years or 20 years that they know nothing about. instead of jumping to the conclusion that the departments have screwed up. If you'd only talk to your department head first, you may get it straightened out. I'm glad I'm leaving this chaos, and though I don't think it's possible, I wish the county well.
Thank you.
You are.
Sharon.
A couple of comments. The reason
Sure.
there were constraints put on various departments, and especially the road department, they had a blank check. They could sign for anything they wanted.
The policy that was in place said that we had
Unlimited spending authority.
on
Yeah.
goods, purchasing
Yeah.
goods. We couldn't go into contracts, we couldn't purchase services, it was only for goods, like parts for
No other
vehicles.
department has unlimited spending authority.
The road
Now,
department
number
has
two.
nothing to do with the general fund.
Number two, when I had my speech that morning at the road department, there were employees talking to other employees as well as the public with F this and F that, and they said that will no longer continue. And that will terminate now. And I meant
You made a
it.
big deal about going to every other department.
No,
and
I
you
didn't.
go to-
But
Yes.
what I wanted, it was the only department I was getting complaints from was people in the road department with F this and F that, and that was going to stop because that leads to sexual harassment charges, which the
Yeah.
county can't afford.
And that one of the
Okay.
employees who was in here daily complaining to you had been charged with, and now he was throwing a big fit about it.
But it stopped, I hope. I haven't heard any more reports. Your own fund comes in, the only reason you have your own fund is because Don Gurney convinced former commissioners that the
That's
Coos Bay Wagon Road
Thank
grant
you.
land money would go instead of school support, which was offset by the state, that it would stay in the road department. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any in the first place.
That's right.
He's saved the county millions of dollars.
But we know it's going away.
But
so
it will
we
go
made-
away if and when there's an agreement with the tribe, because that money will go into the general fund and no longer in the road
That's right.
department.
So we won't have any money. That's what we were saving for. That's what the reserve was. that
I
you said was
understand
surplus.
that. However, when you're not on this end,
No.
when you
Thank
have
God.
5, 10, 15, 20 people a day calling up about their road condition
The road
and how
conditions,
bad it was.
they have gotten increasingly worse over
Now-
the last 10 years. And now, the roadmaster who knows his engineering and knows what he's doing, they're getting back in the good shape that they should have been.
Well, he's actually not an engineer, you know
He's
that.
not an engineer.
I know that. Now,
That's-
since we've added those 5 people, I've got, I don't know how many calls from
Probably
people.
from those 5 people and their
Nope.
families.
Sharon, that is not true. I can give you names of people on the roads where they're extremely happy now that the roads are graded and been brushed and the potholes have been filled in the asphalt and that sort of thing. And that's where they were added.
So you think 5 people did all that work?
Huh?
You-
No, but it really helped. You didn't have enough folks to do that.
It didn't help.
In 1999, the county had 522 employees. Do you know how many we have now?
300?
257, less than half. You know, people think because of the media that government has grown exponentially in people. We haven't.
No.
We have less than half we had 10, 11 years ago.
That's right.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.